What's going on, everybody? Welcome into the Sunbelt Syndicate. Oh my gosh, what a way to open the show, tripping over the title of the show. But this is the basketball edition, aka the Round Ball Roundup, presented to you by Dogs Media Network, part of collegefootballdogs.com, also sponsored by W Energy. Down below, promo code SB Syndicate at checkout. Help us out a little bit. They just announced what their best-selling flavor was, which is Big Tears Energy. And that doesn't tell you at all what the flavor is, right, TJ? But it is a blue raspberry flavor, which makes sense, right? You want that little pucker, that energy, that taste there, I guess. But welcome to the show, TJ O'Sullivan, Coastal Carolina grad and covering basketball for College Basketball Review, right? I get that right?
Yes, CBB Review. I'm a staff writer with them, and I do a little work with ESPN Syracuse on the side.
Perfect, and that's so. And also, I snooped around on you a little bit and found out you're actually from Shelton, Connecticut. Is that correct?
That is correct.
So did I have to ask, did you grow up a Huskies fan, or are you still kind of a Huskies fan, or no?
I'll get a lot of hate from people in my hometown, but I am not a Huskies fan. I actually wanted to get as far south of Connecticut as possible, which is why I ended up at Coastal Carolina. Much better winters down there.
Does make sense. So were you born and raised in the Connecticut area then, or were you from the South and wanted to return back down south?
Originally born in Texas. I left when I was very young. I was raised in Connecticut. And then for the past couple of years, going to Coastal Carolina and then, bouncing around the East Coast, just trying to find work where I could. And we ended up at Syracuse, starting to do some coverage for the men's and women's basketball teams and, just chugging along, I guess.
Nice. So you did end up in that northeastern harsh winter, though, again, huh?
Yeah, exactly. I tell people all the time, I traded palm trees for 3 feet of snow every snowfall. It's I wish I could go back.
Yeah. Oh, man. I don't doubt it, man. I spend at least a week, sometimes 2, in the Myrtle Beach area. So I definitely know that part of South Carolina pretty well at this point. I guess mostly North Myrtle Beach, or is it Cherry? I always get this wrong. Cherry Grove, not Cherry Point, right? Or
well, Cherry Point is North Carolina.
Okay.
Cherry Grove sounds better. I'm more, gotcha. I used to hang out on the Strip. I used to hang out in Conway. That was my neck of the woods. Nice.
Yeah, and that makes sense, right? I mean, what is it, like a 20-minute drive roughly to the beach, 15?
10, depending on, how fast you go. But, it's 501 traffic, not the best, but once you get there, it's a beautiful spot.
Yeah. I was surprised when I went down there for football that it was, so heavily, traffic, I guess. But I mean, that's a good thing. I mean, that means people are moving out and about when there's big games in town. So
it means people don't know how to drive. But yes, definitely the culture with Coastal since 2020 has gone up, and that was something that I was privileged to be able to witness. That community growing.
Yeah, I got to see some interviews with you and Grayson McCall and Jamie Chadwell outside the Cure Bowl. So it looked like you got to go down and partake in that in the past, huh?
Yeah, I got to go down. I was a student reporter with WCCU Radio, and it looks like I lost the camera on my end.
We can still hear you, though, so please continue.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. But I was a student reporter down there, and that we got to call the entire home schedule of the football season. It was my first time doing any sort of play-by-play, and from there, got to go down to the Cure Bowl, and that was one of the coolest experiences. That was the second year for Coastal in the Cure Bowl, and we had a chance to actually experience it this time around because that first one was right in the middle of the pandemic. So getting a chance to actually experience bowl time festivities and interviewing about half of the team, it was a really cool experience. And Coastal got the win in We'll say less that, we'll say, I guess, sus fashion, but, we'll take a win when we can get it.
No, absolutely. At that point, last game of the year, you just want to go out with the dub. It doesn't really matter how it comes. We saw that a couple times with Sunbelt teams this year, right? I mean, there were some ugly ones, and there were some ones where a couple of our teams were up pretty big at the beginning and blew it. So if you get a W, it doesn't really matter how it comes because got the whole offseason to enjoy it and celebrate the victory, I guess. But yeah, I am glad to hear that you got to experience it because I didn't realize the first one you went down to was the COVID one, which is it's not fun to go to a destination bowl game and then be restricted, I guess, right?
Right, exactly. It is. It's weird, and we didn't get to really experience that. But that 2021 game that was awesome.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Well, without further ado, we will jump into some basketball stuff here. And I guess before we really get going with some of the scores, I'll go ahead and get them up just to kind of a quick review of some of these things, and we'll just kind of talk if anything really stood out. I always start, TJ, back from essentially the last show, right? Just a rehash, just so we have the common stuff in front of us. So App State escapes Georgia Southern 85-84 in overtime. Tyrene Moore for Georgia Southern has been their best player, but you've got Absam and Harcum who really luckily pulled it out for App in the end, but not a pretty game. And then you've got James Madison who beat ODU rather easily, and actually for the third time because they had a game early on in the season which was not considered a conference game. I guess we've seen that. Is that becoming more common, TJ? Because I feel like I saw it last year a few times too, where conference teams, maybe not in the bigger conferences, but some of these smaller conferences that maybe struggle for scheduling are kind of just saying, hey, we'll just do a one-off. There's no return game type of thing. Is that more commonplace here in basketball these days from what you see?
Well, it all depends on the scheduling. I mean, it's, I know that Syracuse, for example, they played at Cameron Indoor this year, and then they just don't get a return game. It all comes down to scheduling who these schedules are made probably, months, years in advance at times. So I think it all just comes down to what kind of travel these teams want to put in, what makes sense. And for some time, because there's only so many games you can fit into a season, that's really all it comes down to. Yeah,
I guess that does make sense. It's just weird that, well, maybe not weird. Maybe it makes even more sense that these two teams aren't terribly far apart. Although I think, well, it's hard for me to say. Old Dominion's kind of out there on an island a little bit, even though they're East Coast. Their closest team might be James Madison. It may be close between Coastal and James Madison, to be honest. I feel like even though they're both in the state of Virginia, it's like a 4 or 5 hour trek for them, which maybe puts you in Coastal Carolina territory before too long as well, because you kind of maybe shoot down I-95 there to jump down to the Conway area. But interesting nonetheless. JMU gets the best of them for a third time. Arkansas State takes care of ULM, again, rather easily, 15-point game. Troy just barely escaped some pesky Panthers, 78-74 in this one. Are you a clear-cut favorite guy? Like you think like Troy might be the head of this conference as of right now, or you think it's somebody else?
I don't know that it's clear-cut right now. It's, there's 4 teams right now in this conference that really stand out to me. It's App State, James Madison, Troy, and Louisiana. Those are that's your top tier. I think that App State and James Madison are a half step up from the other two as it stands right now. But Troy definitely, they've only lost 2 games in conference. They're doing the work when it matters. And they're someone to be worried about down in Pensacola. If I remember correctly, they play the tournament in Pensacola.
That's correct. Yep.
Yeah, but there's someone to watch out for because, you look at James Madison and the talent that they have and the defensive presence of App State. And those are the 2 teams that are, making the rounds in your mid-major top 25. And those are the names coming out of the Sun Belt. But Troy, keep an eye on them. They are, a 4-point win over a struggling Georgia State team. Like, don't pay any attention to that. Pay attention to the games before that led to them being 10-2 right now in conference.
Yeah, no, very true. I definitely agree with that. Definitely one of the more formidable teams in this one. Rounding out the Saturday scores, Cajuns, as you just mentioned, one of the better teams here, easily take care of South Alabama, 80-68. I think it was Hosanna Katinge's big game in that one that helps the Cajuns to the victory. Texas State on a streak here lately. We'll cover their other game as well, but they end up beating Southern Miss 60-55. And Marshall, TJ, unfortunately gets past your alma mater rather easily, 91-74. All right, we got you back up on screen.
Yeah.
So, quickly before we move on to the Wednesday scores, Coastal Carolina, obviously, like you said, you kind of covered them when you were down there. What are your thoughts on the team? I mean, you were there when some of the good years, when your historic coach was still in charge, and now there's been a change there. Obviously that means some player movement's going to happen as well. What are your kind of current thoughts on where Coastal sits and what the future may hold for them?
Well, when Coastal has found success in recent years, and there hasn't been much of it, but when they have found success, it has been the modern college sporting model, which is attack that transfer portal, find those D1, those high major bounce backs, and you end up building a team basically year to year, and you got to see if they mesh. Back in 2022, they meshed, and they ended up in the finals of the basketball, the basketball tournament, I think is the is the name of it, or the class, or the basketball classic. One of those. We hosted the final, and that was one of those times where it worked. But this year, on top of just having a struggling season thus far, but then Cliff Ellis ends up retiring. So there's going to be some things going wrong in that locker room. Maybe not necessarily with the players and the coaches, but it's a shock. So I think that Coastal, now with a new head coach, it's not determined yet whether or not that head coach is going to be staying there. His name is escaping me right now. But they figure out what they're going to be doing this offseason, and then they move forward. And hopefully they can attack that transfer portal in the offseason and start the new era of Coastal basketball on a much more positive note. Yeah,
it just makes too much sense for a beach school essentially to be good at basketball. To me, you're probably be able to play outside most of the year. And to just kind of, like the mountain schools like James Madison and App State and Marshall, I mean, they could be good too, but it's harder thought process to think a lot of people desire to be playing basketball up in the really cold climates. Although, as we just opened the show and talked about UConn being one of the best teams and obviously the champions from last year, they don't really struggle in the regard of, a cold climate to play basketball in. When you've got a historic culture and program, I guess it doesn't really matter. But obviously most of the Sun Belt schools are not, unfortunately, falling into that category. So, but yeah, I mean, I think the warmer climate teams hopefully can hold some sort of an advantage. After Marshall gets the victory over Coastal, though, they get hammered pretty good by Troy again. As you mentioned, one of the better teams in this conference. Southern Miss takes care of ODU, who's had their struggles as well, just like Coastal Carolina. They lose 78-73 in that one. Coastal Carolina once again drops another one to ULM, 79-75, and the Cajuns drop a surprise one down there in the Cajun Dome to Georgia State, as we mentioned, kind of pesky against Troy in the weekend matchup, and then they stay hot, they stay good in Wednesday's game and beat the Cajuns. That was a little bit of a surprise to you to see that one end up that way?
It would have been a surprise had it not been for the entire state of Georgia winning games that they're not supposed to. With Georgia Tech, they knock off North Carolina earlier in the season. They knock off Duke. I think something's just in the water in Georgia this year. Just stay away from any team anywhere near Atlanta.
That makes sense. I mean, Atlanta being kind of a hotbed for basketball, it does make sense there. Even though Georgia State's had their struggles, like you said with Coastal, Georgia State's kind of seemingly gone through some similar aspects with a good head coach leaving, at different terms, obviously. But yeah, nonetheless, some things to go through for Georgia State there as well. Getting through the rest of Wednesday's scores, South Alabama takes out Georgia Southern 78-65. Actually, I was a little surprised in this one. Georgia Southern had been playing what I thought was a little bit better, and South Alabama, I believe, came into that game in a 5-game losing streak. So I actually thought Georgia Southern could sneak up and get another conference victory after having none before conference play started, but not to be. James Madison gets by a kind of sneaky Arkansas State team. They're one of the best three-point shooting teams in the league, but the Dukes get by them 77-73. And then App State, just like we talked about with the Cajuns, they drop a game on the road in San Marcos there to Texas State, 63-56, and the Bobcats now on a 3-game win streak. So any thoughts on the 3 games that we're looking at the screen there? Maybe the App State one is the biggest one to talk about.
Yeah, I mean, App State, as every team is, I know you're an App State guy. This might not go over well, but they were due to drop a sneaky in-conference game at some point. They're coming off an 8-game win streak. I don't think it's anything to be concerned about. They're still, in my opinion, the best team in the Sun Belt right now. They just need to, they just need to bounce back. They come off of a sneaky win against Georgia Southern, 1-point victory, and then they kind of fall asleep at the wheel. So now they have the Sun Belt MAC Challenge to kind of correct that as they head into their final 8 games. Yeah,
hopefully, like you said, for my sake and the rest of the Mountaineers out there, they can rebound, but. Yeah, and I feel like, too, and you probably know this from your time covering basketball, I feel like Texas State is a sneaky place to go play for East teams especially. The furthest travel you're going to have to take for a basketball game in all likelihood during your season. And, yeah, I mean, they're not even the greatest team well, they're actually kind of pretty hot right now, I guess, with that 3-game win streak. But historically not necessarily the best team, but something weird about the environment down there in San Marcos. They get some victories in conference that maybe – a lot of people didn't give them a chance in going in. A quick look at the standings here, and TJ, I also put some arrows for the people that are seeing it visually, and not unfortunately for the ones listening on the audio version, but a little bit of movement since the last time we saw this graph. Again, it's been essentially a week. App State and Troy switch places. The head-to-head goes to Troy, and they do not play again this year. So Troy will continue to hold that tiebreaker if they stay tied in the standings. Most of the other teams towards the top stay in the same spots. But then we've got a decent amount of movement there towards the bottom half of the league. Anything here really stand out to you that you want to make note of?
Nothing that really stands out to me. I mean, like I said, you've got the top 4 teams and just about everybody else. It's, in terms of who we're talking about for postseason tournaments and who we're talking about for favorites for the Sun Belt, don't get me wrong. Like Marshall could go on a run, Southern Miss could go on a run, and they could be right in this conversation. But as it stands right now, it's just those top 4 teams that we're really worried about. And App State and Troy just swapping places with the same in-conference record. It's still anyone's conference right now.
Yeah. No, I definitely agree with that. So the next slide here is going to be the women's standings. I always like to at least give a little bit of coverage there. So before we do that, though, do you have your early favorite, if you had to put a stamp of approval or money down, whatever it may be, that you'd say, I'm taking this team, I just trust them a little bit more to win the conference tournament?
I was thinking about this because, when we're, planning to come on here, it was App State all the way. And I still hold pretty true to that. I think that App State is the most talented team in the Sun Belt right now. You have to look at James Madison, though. And when you look at those 2 teams side by side, you've got the best offense in the Sun Belt in James Madison. And then I'm trying to get my hand in the screen. The best offense in the Sun Belt in James Madison, and then you've got the best defense in App State. They don't go up against each other again. They've already played twice. App State has their number. They're 2-0 against they're 2-0 against James Madison. But I wouldn't be surprised. Those are both single-digit losses. I wouldn't be surprised if James Madison were to pull out a third in that third matchup, potential third matchup in the Sun Belt tournament, I wouldn't be surprised if they pulled it out. Will they? Only time's going to tell. But like you look at this James Madison team and the amount of scoring that they do, I don't think that there's a single player in the Sun Belt that can match up like step for step, shot for shot with Terrence Edwards Jr. He is a heck of a talent. He is on his way to having a very successful basketball career. He impresses me. And I think just one of these games, one of these times, you're going to see TJ Bickerstaff have just as impressive of a night when they're going up against a team like App State or a team like Troy or Louisiana. And you're going to see just what this team can do. Like 21-3, impressive, but we're yet to see that team really unload on one of these top half teams. And it's just bound to happen. And I think it could happen in a really, really good spot. So I have a slight lean towards James Madison if they have to play for a third time.
I think, and it's true almost every sport, right? Like it's hard to beat any team that many times in a row without dropping one. So I think you're right, and it makes total sense. And one more name, I love the two names you threw out. TJ Bickerstaff is just, when you watch him, he's just fluid. Like he's just a solid, consistent basketball player. Noah Friedel, he's been hot this last week, these last two games. And so if they get all three of those guys, so I'm looping in Friedel with the guys you mentioned, Bickerstaff and Edwards. Yeah, like you said, watch out for this team because that's you got three of the five guys on the court at all time going off. That's a dangerous thing to be seen. Do you have a sneaky team? And if you need a minute to think, I can throw mine out first before we move on. Somebody that's maybe middle of the pack or just under those first few good teams that you think could make some noise in the tournament. We saw South Alabama do it last year, go on their big run to get all the way to the championship game, in fact, and give Louisiana one heck of a time trying to still close that one out.
Well, I mean, I've already kind of said, any team in Georgia is not a good pull. I think Georgia State is someone that you can, think about 2 or 3 years ago when Georgia State won the Sun Belt tournament. Nobody expected them to do what they did, and then they ended up in the dance. So I think that Georgia State, not Southern, is just always a team to watch out for because they play with a different type of intensity. They're very scrappy. They're very defensive driven. It just hasn't clicked yet this year, but there's still 7 or 8 games to go. Don't count them out yet.
Yeah, no, I agree with them. To me, it was between them and the team right above them in the standings right now in Arkansas State. To me, Arkansas State doesn't necessarily have like that one big dominant man down low. That's where I feel like they can't necessarily completely take over a game. But again, I think I mentioned it earlier part of the show. One of the best, and I think they may still be the best 3-point shooting team in the conference. And TJ, I'm sure with your experience in basketball, all it takes is for them to get hot at the right time. If they're shooting out lights out from three and they can put 3-4 games together, now they're going to end, possibly find themselves in a championship game that no one had them, having any business being in before the conference tournament started. So it's funny that we both picked teams that were, neck and neck right there in the conference, and for similar reasons about them getting hot and having the ability to surprise some people. So yeah, pretty good there. But I don't see any of the bottom couple teams there to Texas State, again, 3-game win streak. I just don't see that run continuing a whole lot longer with where they currently are in the standings at this point. So do you watch much of the women's game? I mean, I know it's hard, if you're consistently watching what you have to do and what you follow, it's hard to follow another sport in general, and one that's a little different too, right? They're still playing 4 quarters on the women's side, but do you ever get to check out, or how much, maybe did you cover when you were down there in Conway?
Well, when I was down in Conway, I was pretty in tune with the Sun Belt women's the women's division. It was, I remember a team in Conway that I thought should have done a lot more with Aaron Freeman, who's still there, but then you had Jordan Newsom, Janine Camp, 6'5", and absolutely deadly within 5 feet and blocks shots into the third row. I thought that Coastal team had a chance to do something special, and it just never clicked. But yeah, I mean, I try to keep tabs. I'm more into the ACC right now in terms of women's basketball, but admittedly, I should be doing more.
Well, yeah, it's again, when you literally, are told to follow a certain thing, you kind of have to do that.
Yeah.
And obviously there is another level to the ACC, and that's one reason why we literally put this show together, to bring some more awareness and some more followers to Sunbelt Conference basketball. So in doing that, this is really interesting. For the last 2 weeks at least, maybe even longer than that, this standings has stayed relatively similar, with the top teams continuing to win and the bottom teams kind of continuing to lose. And the only movement really is right there in the middle. I think a clear favorite here is Marshall to take this conference, but James Madison's women did just go in there and beat them to get their first, or hand the Herd their first conference loss. So I don't know if you have any real thoughts on this. Again, I'll be honest, I'm not going to lie to everybody watching or paying attention. I don't get all the ins and outs of the games and everything. I am scoreboard watching and standing watching, so I can't put a total, eye test on this one. But I would say Marshall is pretty much the clear-cut favorite as of right now to take it on the women's side, unless you see or heard anything different over there, TJ.
No, I mean, I am looking at these standings. Yeah, Marshall is, I'll take your word for it if I'm honest. But no, I mean, from what I remember from last year covering the Sun Belt, keep an eye on James Madison on the women's side as well. They don't have Kiki Jefferson anymore. She followed me to the ACC. But the James Madison women they are dangerous. They get on you in a hurry, and they put up a lot of points at a time. So that's definitely a team to watch out for. And the Troy women, and a couple years ago, the App State women. I would say 6-6 App State. Just keep an eye on them. They might be a sneaky Final Four pick in the Sun Belt tournament. I keep almost saying ACC tournament. I apologize, but they could be a sneaky semifinal round pick.
Yeah. Oh, well, hey, I'd personally love to see it. I know.
I'm just playing to my audience right now.
Yeah, exactly. We do have a question, and I want to get to it before we move on here. It's football related. So, okay. Obviously that it comes from the Big Ten backers, who are also part of the Dogs Media Network, for any Big Ten fans out there. But he's asking, what do you think about Cignetti clearing out the staff and taking them all to Indiana? Can Indiana compete in the Big Ten with Cignetti, and can JMU football rebound without him? TJ, do you want to take a shot at that one first? I guess I'll keep that up there so people can read that back if they want while you answer that one.
Well, what I will tell you about Curt Cignetti, I think that he is one of the premier names in college football right now in terms of coaches. I know that he hasn't proven himself at the power conference level yet, but look at the work that he did at James Madison. Just the ability to attack that transfer portal. I mean, he went out and found Todd Centeio, and Centeio went off and had an incredible year. Absolutely. James Madison was the force to be reckoned with. Coastal didn't hand them the torch. They ripped it out of their hands. Yeah. And that was just the way that it went in their first year. And then they follow that up with, a 12-1 year. So, he's had one loss, I think, in his entire time at James Madison at the FBS level. I could be wrong there. It could be 3. But even so, like, him taking the entire staff to Indiana with a game that has been affected so much by the transfer portal, I think that he could easily turn around and just create a contending team. I mean, look what this is pretty local for me. Look what Fran Brown is doing in Syracuse. Yep. He came from Georgia as an assistant coach, and he's all of a sudden he's got 5 stars looking at Syracuse. Syracuse football hasn't been relevant since Donovan McNabb. So it's yep. Hey, I mean, it's like at that elite level, they haven't been there. They've had 2 straight seasons where they've been right outside of the top 25, or they've been ranked, and then they go on a 5-game losing streak when they get to in conference. So Fran Brown, getting those transfers. Kurt Signetti, I'm sure that he's putting in work right now. I don't keep tabs on Indiana football right now, but I'm sure that he will be just fine. It might take a year or two, but I'm sure that Indiana will win their big game within the next 2 or 3 years.
Yeah, I don't think you're wrong there at all. I like what you're thinking, and you may remember this. I think this was during your time at Coastal when App State lost Drinkwitz to Missouri. I feel like this is a very similar, like a sneaky good hire. Maybe it's not even sneaky. Maybe enough people know. One thing that is different here is how many people Signetti took with him, but obviously the transfer portal rules were vastly different at that time. But we've seen what Drinkwitz has done here in Missouri, just like you said, kind of getting them with Syracuse, just outside the top 25, or, at this point, I think he had them within the top 25 a few times this season, and getting some 5-star recruits and stealing some recruits from some big time conferencing. And not to mention, Signetti didn't just clean out James Madison. He took a few players from a few Sunbelt teams. So he's doing his best to put a all-star Sunbelt roster up against everybody else in the Big Ten. And I'm really interested to see how it goes. I'm not necessarily going to root for Indiana, I don't think, but if they look good, that's going to only bode well for what it meant for all those guys coming out of the Sun Belt Conference and probably playing some big roles. Like you said, may take a year there at Indiana, but they may roll that into a winning culture and a fan base that's going to be really excited for the future moving forward. So even though it was off topic, thank you very much for the question, because it's obvious TJ possesses a ton of football knowledge, just like the other TJ who helps me host the football version of the show. TJ, we're going to have to loop you back in come football, man. I'm very impressed with your knowledge base and everything you've got to say so far.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
Yeah. So I know that you at some point have to get rolling. I'm going to run through each game of this Max Sunbelt Challenge rolling up. If you want to stay, you can. If you need to go, obviously understand that. But that is the next thing to jump into here, just kind of looking about what the team did the last time in the MAC Challenge and what they've got coming up this time around.
Let's run through some Sunbelt action, and then I'll take off here.
Okay. We'll go through the kind of, I'll be honest, the bottom kind of teams first. So we'll roll through these a little bit faster. And as we get up to the top 4 or 5 teams, we'll maybe talk about them a little bit more. South Alabama went up against Buffalo in that first matchup. Buffalo team that's not very good there in the MAC at this point in time. So South Alabama took that one rather easily. Now they're playing Northern Illinois, who dismantled App State, honestly, in their first round matchup, which now looking back looks very shocking. But it was an early season match. I guess at that point, nobody really knew what to expect. What do you think, this one holds for us, I guess? I don't think either team's going to blow anybody away. So you have either a favorite or just a thought on this one real quick?
Well, I'll use this as an opportunity to kind of touch on what you were saying, that I continue to have to explain to people on Twitter. I don't take the November matchups that seriously in February. That's one of the first games of the season. Granted, you look at who actually won in the MAC Sunbelt Challenge first time around, and you had the top 4 teams in the Sunbelt right now. 3 of them lost, and James Madison took double overtime to win. So It's like, that's just the first couple games of the season. I don't think anyone knew what was going on. And NIU's 8-14 right now. They could be a completely different team. So I think that South Alabama, they got to do their homework. They got to get in and they got to take care of business. NIU is not someone to be messed with, obviously. Yeah. They can't fall asleep on them. But I would take the first round against App State with a grain of salt.
Gotcha. Yeah, I don't disagree there. Honestly, 91 points against Justin Abson, as we talked about before the show started a little bit. TJ Spiller, Spillers. I can't even know the first name. Sometimes I'm getting all the things mixed up. But yeah, it seems kind of strange at this point. I think someone scored 91 points on them earlier in the season. This one not nearly as high scoring as that 91 point total we just talked about, but Old Dominion does drop a close one to Ball State. Old Dominion's gone through a bunch of turmoil with the health of their head coach, their best player in Vashawn Allett being literally kicked off the team for reasons essentially unknown. a Canadian player, really. He had come down from up north, the Great White North, and been the best player, actually the leading scorer in the conference when he was removed from the team, surprisingly enough. So what do you think that kind of presents in this one with what they've lost going up against a team like Central Michigan, who kind of just like the game we talked about before, not really doing a tremendous job of winning games there in the MAC at this point of the season?
Well, maybe not at this point in the season, but Central Michigan also, they're 8-3 in conference. I think that Central Michigan is at the point right now where they are still in the picture for some higher seedings. And they're going to take this one seriously. You take every game seriously, but I think they're going to have a little something extra here, try and get some bragging rights for the MAC conference. This is a game that I don't think Old Dominion stands much of a chance in. I think that, like you said, there's a lot going on in that locker room. It's not impossible. I don't think this is the marquee matchup that we're going to be talking about. There's two of them, but I think Central Michigan will take this one.
Yeah, I feel like this one's weird to me, and to be honest, I was totally confusing Central Michigan with Western Michigan because the colors are somewhat similar, but that's where my mind goes. But yeah, Central Michigan, this is one of those weirder matchups, where the MAC team is kind of quite a bit higher than the Sun Belt team. I think they try and usually kind of match these teams up pretty well together, but this one didn't get that. So very interesting to see this one here. Next one, we've got ULM, again, playing the Central Michigan team we just talked about in that first round, winning by 10 in that one. And now they're going up against a team who's right in the standings, worse than what Central Michigan is, in a team down there towards the bottom in Eastern Michigan. Is this a similar thing of the game we just saw, but flip-flop, where the Sun Belt team is a little bit more superior than the MAC team, or are these kind of closer than they look in the standings side of things?
I think it looks probably a little closer, in the same sentiment of don't take the November games that seriously. ULM coming out and beating a Central Michigan team and then going on to be 8-14. That's, I think that's the opposite effect, is they caught them early season on a good night. So I think this one will be close. I think it'll be maybe 5 points or less difference. I don't know that I have a pick in this one. I think it's going to come down to just, who's having a better night from the field.
Yeah, that makes sense. I know that they've got I believe he's Russian, maybe Ukrainian. They've got a big man down low for ULM. I'm going to butcher his name, but it's Nika Metsva Meshikasavilla. I probably crushed that. But
you did better than I would have done.
Either.
You did better than I would have done.
Yeah, I hopefully they just call him like Mets or something, because it's the first four letters of the name. I'm sure you can get away with that. You're doing a broadcast. I can't imagine trying to trip over that thing too many times. As you
just in practice. Just in practice. Hey, you. That's what. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Oh man. So next one we've got up is Bowling Green, that took out Arkansas State in round one there, 81-75. Now Arkansas State's going to match up here with the Ohio Bobcats. And honestly, I can't remember off the top of my head. Ohio's kind of sitting there at 7-4 currently in the MAC, just 13-10 overall. So not a vast difference from where Arkansas State is. This one probably more even across the board, I guess, going in and trying to decipher who. I think actually, I had a question mark beside this one, because that meant to me this one's more of a coin toss. Like if I was betting man, I wouldn't put any money on this one, I guess is what I'm thinking.
This one and the ULM Eastern Michigan game, I'll stay away from DraftKings on this one. It's I remember covering Norshad Omier when he was with the Red Wolves, but this is not the same team, and they haven't really seen the same success since. Ohio, on the other hand, sitting fifth in the conference right now. Arkansas State, they're in the middle of the pack in the Sun Belt. This is just going to be I think this is going to be one of those battleground games to see who actually comes out with this conference, is, which one of these teams takes this. Yeah.
And I did want to note, at no point did it really make sense to throw it in, so I'll just throw it in now because we're talking about some teams that are kind of close. The MAC did take this first round in games overall 7-5, and to be totally honest with you, I've got almost like the exact flip of this in my predictions for the Sun Belt to kind of come out on top. And part of that is probably because most of those teams are hosting. But that, is what it is there.
Yeah, I mean, there are some tough environments in the Sun Belt. It's not known as a basketball conference, but like some of these fan bases in the Sun Belt, they get loud, and that affects an offense coming in.
And does it also do the same thing when there's not much of a presence too? I mean, is it hard? It's got to be hard sometimes for players to go play in places where there really isn't any fans too. In the same regard, I feel like the MAC probably puts more butts in seats. I've not actually looked at those numbers, to be totally honest with you, but I would assume MAC teams are bringing more people on average than Sunbelt teams in basketball. Do you know that to be any kind of fact at all by chance?
I know that there are some MAC teams that definitely bring in more fans, but I think kind of what you're getting at, my take on it, like it's not necessarily the lack of fans that throws off a team coming in, but I think it kind of plays with your mind a little bit, like, oh, these guys don't even get fans, and then they fall asleep at the wheel. So that could be what we see here. Now that the Sun Belt's hosting, there are a couple of fan bases that pack out the arenas, and then there are others that basketball is just not their sport. So, I'm not going to speculate on that, but it could very well be a factor.
Yeah. It'll be interesting to see with some of these places because, unfortunately, a team like Georgia Southern has not got a lot of excitement around them right now. Although, kind of as mentioned, they didn't win a single game outside of the conference. They come into this conference. It's not really easy to string wins together in, and they've won 5. So kind of a surprise there. So, again, nothing would maybe surprise me in this one, especially since I think we talked about Buffalo being – literally the very bottom of the MAC at this point. 1-9 in conference, just 8-5, or I'm sorry, 2-20 overall. Wow,
2-20, which is surprising. It's surprising. Buffalo is usually a team that puts a program that puts a scrappy team out on the floor. They have checked out this season. That was surprising for me to see.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that's why I just did a double take. I'm like, wait, did I read the wrong stat line there? Yeah,
exactly.
2-20. Okay. Well, I did take Georgia Southern in this one. That one was pretty clear to me. I just don't, like you said, Buffalo's not got it this year. And Georgia Southern, as much as their struggles had happened, I think they're probably the hottest they've been kind of at this point of the season.
Yeah,
a team we talked about earlier, Georgia State now. State, not Southern, as you mentioned before. They take down Western Michigan in their first matchup, 77-70, and now are matching up with Miami of Ohio. Miami kind of sitting mid-pack, just very similar to Georgia State. Is this yet another kind of toss-up game or a battleground state? I almost said battleground state. Battleground game, as you mentioned before as well.
Well, elections coming up. People are starting to campaign, so – no, I think this is another one of those battleground games. It's two teams that are looking to turn something around or start a push. It's going to be a good game. I do have Georgia State in this one, and I feel like a lot of Georgia Southern fans are going to be upset that I brought up State, not Southern, but I couldn't help myself.
Well, I was going to say, we'll know here in a minute if people start rolling through the comments. But if not, they'll probably let us know later on the social media aspect. Maybe I'll take some clips and make you famous on their end. But yeah, I agree with you here. I'm taking Georgia State. I think they've been playing very well lately. They've got kind of a three-headed monster. If Lane and Odom can team up with, I'm going blank on the third name that I was thinking of. Is it Taylor maybe? I think it was Taylor I was thinking of, but a couple of those guys have been putting some games together lately. If all three of them are hot, just as kind of mentioned with James Madison earlier, they could maybe roll that into a victory here against Miami of Ohio. And then we've got Akron and USM that matched up in the first round, Akron winning rather easily. Southern Miss kind of struggled to put it together. I don't know how much you were aware of the team that they thought they were going to have come into this season has not been healthy. And not really been all on the floor at the same time. However, they've still strung some games together. What do you think that they could present to Western Michigan in round 2 here?
Well, yeah, and like you said, talking about what's going on with the team over at Southern Miss, Southern Miss is historically relatively good basketball program. So looking at their standing right now, it was surprising to me that they were only 7-5 in conference, just 2 games over 500. Like that was a shock to me. I wouldn't count them out. I would say that they take this one against Western Michigan, just because I know how this team plays. They shoot the ball well. They play rough defense. They are very active. Yeah, I'll take the Golden Eagles in this one.
Yeah, Southern Miss seems to always, like you said, they're very physical, a very physical team. They're very proud of how they play on the boards. I think at least 2, maybe 3 games this year, I've seen clips or been watching the game when one of their players gets cut in the face. So if that doesn't tell you the brand of basketball that those guys play down there, I don't know what else to tell you. So, yeah, I definitely favor that one a little bit here. Texas State got a victory in their first one against Miami, Ohio, going up against Ball State this time around. As mentioned, 3-game win streak also coming into this weekend's matchup. Does that continue for the Bobcats for you?
I could see them continuing. I could see them stretching it to 4. Ball State sitting right around 500. They are, this is another one of those games where Ball State's going to have to figure out whether or not they want to make a push. They're kind of out of the picture of some of those top couple seeds in the tournament at this point. But, improving as much as you can, this is still a team that can put they can pull out some wins when you don't expect them to. So I do have Texas State, though. I think Texas State stays hot. I think they could be that late season push in the Sun Belt that really shocks and turns some people's heads.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think they continue this role while they're hot here. We do have one question. Are we going to discuss the Washington State winning the Pac-2 in men's basketball? No is the answer to that.
Congratulations to Washington State by default.
Yeah, enjoy it while you can. One of 2 teams, one of them had to win, and there you go. Wazoo did it. Okay, so now we're starting to roll into a little bit better the teams at the top, at least for the Sun Belt, mostly for the MAC as well. I think, obviously, I had a little thing here. There's a Ordinal Sports Group who's kind of putting this together or assisting in putting these matchups together. And they're combining relevant net data, geography, frequency of past contests, and that's going to be considered to help shape these matchups, which actually, before we talk to this one, is it surprising to you that Marshall wasn't included in this, being located where they are, so close to so much of the MAC country, and they just didn't get included in it? And I don't know the background of that. Maybe they didn't have interest or whatever. They were just the odd man out. But it seems kind of interesting that a team, I think, in fact, Ohio's on the screen. I think they have a big historical rivalry with Ohio, at least on the football field. Is it surprising that they were not included in this challenge?
Well, a lot of these challenges, the ACC SEC challenge just started this year, and instead of not including half-member Notre Dame, they kicked out Louisville. So, I don't even know what goes into those discussions, but I think in Marshall's case, it hurts them a lot this year because they're just on the outside of those Elite Four, and they could use this as an opportunity to push their way up if they get one of those marquee matchups. So I think it hurts them, but I think it's just the way that the cards are dealt.
Yeah. I found that interesting. I felt like the Coastal one, maybe along with any team that was that far south, made sense. You could eliminated just about anybody from deep south and say that there's no historic thing here with any MAC team, so you leave them out. But Marshall was an interesting one to leave out for me, especially like you said, kind of they've got some history, with being good in the past and everything else. So, but speaking of current teams being good, Troy, as you said, early season loss to Ohio, probably a little surprising to see now. They end up matching up with Kent State, who you had mentioned, took James Madison to double overtime. Probably should have won the game. I don't know how much of that one you actually saw. I was watching it in real time as it went. JMU had no business winning that. I mean, not that it wasn't close. It was, but Kent State really gave it up to even get to overtime in the first place. But we'll talk more about James Madison's side of that here in a minute. But what do you think about this Troy-Kent State matchup?
Well, I sound like a broken record, but go back to that November matchup and you look at where those two teams are now. James Madison, they've got 3 losses on the season. Kent State, they are now 12-11. So now that the season has gone on and we've kind of figured out what these teams have turned into. And we know that Troy now is hot, and Troy is one of the best teams in this conference, in the Sun Belt, that is. I would take Troy in this one in a heartbeat. I don't think it's going to be necessarily close.
Yeah, I think I can agree with that. And speaking of Troy, he comes back in and says, "Win is a win. Don't raid on my parade for Wazoo." No, you should celebrate it, Troy. You should definitely celebrate it as the Troy Trojans we expect to be celebrating this weekend as well. Again, they come back up here right away with the Kent State double overtime loss to James Madison in round 1. James Madison is now going to take on Akron, who had the big win against Southern Miss in round 1. Is this one probably, like you said, one of the marquee or the marquee game of this weekend?
This one is the marquee. You can make a case for the next one. I assume we're going to talk about App State Toledo, but this Akron JMU game, this one is going to say a lot about James Madison. I think one of the major things that I looked at each week trying to see whether or not I can justify putting James Madison back in my rankings, their best win is against Michigan State to start the year. Mm-hmm. But Michigan State hasn't panned out. They're an 8 seed in Joe Lunardi's bracketology, but they are not they are not the Spartans that we expected. No. And I think that, that kind of waters down what James Madison's resume is. You look at 14-0 to start the year, lost to Southern Miss. That's going to happen. You're going to slip up. 2 losses to App State. That really hurts. Yep. So now you have a chance here to go up against Akron, which Akron being top of the MAC, they are ahead. If I'm not mistaken, they're ahead of James Madison in the net rankings. This is going to say a lot about James Madison as we finish this year. I still, at this point in time, think that the Sun Belt is a one-bid conference this year. The 2 names that have a chance are App State and JMU, if a lot of things go right for both teams. Yeah. But James Madison needs to win out if that's the case. In my opinion, their resume just isn't strong enough. And they either have to win out or they got to win the conference championship. But a win against Akron would be huge for them. So I think they've got a lot to play for, and I'll take the Dukes.
I agree with you. I won't lie. I wrote down Akron. Like you said, JMU can put this together and win. And I just don't know if like you said, those 2 losses to App State make me just not fully trust James Madison in a game like this just yet. Because like you mentioned, the strength of schedule probably isn't there for James Madison, and winning this game would certainly help that. But at the same time, I just don't know if they've been in enough quality games yet to kind of win this one. I'd like to see it again, keep that power look. Well, I don't know, power is the right word, but some further respect to the Sun Belt with a James Madison victory here in this one. But yeah.
And I think just one more thing, just to talk about the 2 losses to App State. Yes, those hurt James Madison, but App State is also in the mid-major top 25. They're the number 4 team. This is the 4th best team, according to College Insider. This is the 4th best team outside of the Power 6. So I think that it's okay to have your 2 losses come to them. And even Troy in an in-conference game, Troy is the top of your conference right now. I think those are fine. But beating Akron, who's number 15 on that same list, that's really going to help them. And I think that it's not necessarily the fact that App State, I don't know the best way to put this. It's not that App State losing to them twice is like the end all be all, like you have no shot, but you need to make the most out of the opportunities that you have in front of you if you're James Madison.
Yes, absolutely. We got our Captain America, as he's known on YouTube. He's a big Troy fan. He was around for football season. So Troy Trojans, baby, he's come on and let us know he's still here watching some basketball coverage. So yeah, we think Troy's going to take care of business this weekend here to complete their second round of the the MAC Sun Belt Challenge.
You guys must be very popular to have Captain America watching your stream each week. That's insane. Right? That's one heck of a number one fan.
I don't hate it. Maybe it'll give me a Disney Plus, sponsorship over here.
I don't think so.
No.
Fun fact: I worked at Disney for a little bit, and I didn't get a free Disney Plus subscription, so I don't think so.
Oh yeah, we can all dream, and hopefully this. Have you seen this streaming thing that they're? Well, I guess Disney's not technically a part of it, but ABC is with the sports streaming. Are you excited about that? Have good thoughts about that, or is that going to be not what we want because of the price tag it's going to carry in the end? What do you think about that?
I could go down a rabbit hole here and extend this podcast to an hour 45 on my thoughts on this, but the short version is I think that my idea started with when Florida State was trying to rescind from the ACC and break away. If Florida State were to go, just think about it, like a team like Florida State with a brand that they have, going and getting like an Amazon Prime-esque deal, like Thursday Night Football has with Amazon Prime, or going with Netflix, or going with one of these streaming services. We're all going to streaming anyway, and that could lead to, I think it could lead to football independence just across the board, and the restructuring of FBS. I'm not going to go any further into that because I could, but I think that it's a very cool possibility.
Yeah, no, I don't disagree with that. It looks like we've got a Red Wolves fan up in here too. TJ Lampy, if I'm pronouncing that right. I mean, would you think the E is pronounced at the end of that, TJ, or what do you think? Is it silent E?
50-50. It's either Lampy or Lamp. Yeah,
we'll see. We'll see if we get a response from him. But a Red Wolves fan, I think this might be our first Red Wolves fan who's jumped on and given us a comment. So love that. See that happening. All right. So App State gets hammered in their first round again, as you mentioned, and broken record, but it's true. Early season matchup doesn't really translate into what's going to happen this time around. However, they are playing Toledo, who's up there towards the top of the MAC as of 9-2. I wanted to make sure I got that record right. 9-2 in the MAC, 15-8 overall. So not too far there behind Akron. Probably the second marquee matchup of the weekend. Do they beat the Rockets in this one, or do you have the Rockets upsetting the Mountaineers in this one?
Well, Toledo received votes in the top 25, mid-major top 25. They are the real deal, I think, in terms of mid-majors. I think that they're going to be a real contender in the MAC. I am really impressed with App State's defensive ability. And I think that Trayvon Spillers, he gets not enough love. He is like, you watch this kid play, and he is the real deal. He has the post play. He has the rebounding. He has the ability to pass it out. He doesn't force things. And that's kind of App State's MO ever since Dustin Kearns took over. They are very patient. They let plays develop. They don't force it. They're smart and they're scrappy. I have App State. I have them by double digits.
Oh, wow.
And that'll be my hot take of the evening.
Nice. I'm not even going to tell you what I thought because I like that take so much. I'm gonna leave.
You
that
picked
one.
Toledo, didn't you?
I did.
Well, we have to disagree. We were doing too much agreeing. So
that's true, right? We needed a little first take
to give me your take on Toledo. We gotta argue a little bit.
Well, it's that Toledo's obviously a very consistent team, 15-8 and 9-2 within the conference. So they're not dropping a bunch of games. They're not stringing together bad games, right? They play well more often than they play poorly. And unfortunately for App State, I feel like this game is coming at the wrong time right now. The play against Georgia Southern was not good. It was not impressive. Quite frankly, they probably should have lost that game. They did enough to get it to OT and then won on what seemingly was a very fitting Justin Absent block as time expired to win that one in overtime down there in Statesboro. So they walked away from that, and you think, okay, ugly win, but it was a win. Like you said, you just got to win these things. But they did not rebound well against Texas State. And again, that's maybe not an easy road game to go out there in San Marcos and win. But to me, the play still didn't pick up any better. There was nothing that seemed to click. There was nothing seemed to light a fire in those guys. It just seemed too lackadaisical for me. And now you're coming to this matchup. The only advantage that I'll say, and hopefully that could change things, is those games I just talked about were obviously both on the road, and this one's going to be in the comfy confines of the Holmes Convocation Center there in Boone, North Carolina. So hopefully, again, I'm just going to lean and take your take now that I liked it so much.
I'll offer this. I think that, yes, it's tough to go on the road. I mean, they were on the road for the last 3 games. They faced Georgia State on the road as well. But I think that the one thing to consider is Texas State was their slip up. And I think that was their wake up call. And usually you see, if App State's really about it this year, those good teams, they take that loss and they rebound well. And they come ready to play the next day. And with an opponent against Toledo that could really help their stock going into potential bubble team territory, this is the game to figure out whether or not App State is really about it this year.
Makes sense. I do agree with that one. Oh, surprise. We did not end with App State. So we had the Cajuns to still talk about. In fact, yeah. Okay. So this is the last one. Just wanted to verify that before we got into that. So the Cajuns lost to Toledo in this first round, I guess, like we're calling it here. And now they're going to match up with a Bowling Green team. Cajuns were kind of just about as hot as App State was before dropping this last game to Georgia State. And now they're going to play a team like Bowling Green, and I'm going to have to bring that up and remember exactly where Bowling Green sits. So Bowling Green is 7-4 within the MAC. 16-7 overall. So again, maybe this is the third marquee matchup of the weekend. I don't know. What's your thoughts on the Cajuns? Did they kind of right the ship after that loss to Georgia State, or does Bowling Green come in here and get a victory?
I think they right the ship. Bowling Green, yes, they're towards the middle or top half of the MAC. I wouldn't consider this to be a marquee matchup, though. I think that the Cajuns are in a better spot, and they're in more of, I guess, a spot that makes sense for them to get hot. This is that final push for them, where Bowling Green is kind of just counting the days until the MAC tournament, trying to see what they can put together. I think this is Cajuns all the way.
I tend to agree with you. I think they're going to be pretty ticked off, I guess, is a clean word to use, about how they played there, especially at home in the Cajun Dome, and dropping that one to Georgia State. I don't think they're going to be happy with that performance, and they may take it out on Bowling Green this weekend. So officially that wraps up what the focus of the show is. But TJ, before we get going, first of all, tell people where to follow you. But I also want to hear your early take, because you're doing a little bit more national coverage too as well. You have to be doing it because you're focusing on one of the biggest basketball conferences in the country. So you've got to be aware of everything else going on. So give me your information, but also give me maybe your early outlook on who you think could end up towards the Final Four, or at least the championship game, if you will. If you've already got that, if you don't have that in mind, maybe make one up in the last second here. But I have a feeling you have some ideas of who you expect to get there.
Well, lucky for you, I made a bold prediction at the beginning of the year, and it's on cbbreview.com. My preseason hot, maybe insane takes, I think, is the article name. I have Purdue to the Final Four. I believe that, they're a top 2 team. TJ, great job. You figured it out. But no, I think that, you remember they were a 1 seed last year.
Yep.
And they were upset for the second time ever, a 16-1, when FDU, I can't remember the saying. Yeah. What was it? FDU. FDU. That's that. There's a catchphrase that goes with it.
Fairleigh Dickinson, right? Is that who it was?
Fairleigh Dickinson. Yeah. From the NEC, defeated the number 1 team in the nation, and I think that you look at that roster and you see that they didn't reload because they didn't have to. They returned 11 guys, and they returned the player of the year in Zach Edey, who's pretty much a lock to repeat. So I think that Purdue goes into it and they don't drop the ball. They go into it as a 1 seed. They ride the they go in as a 1 seed. They ride it into the Final Four, and from there, I don't really know, but I do also have North Carolina in the Final Four. And North Carolina, with that recent loss to Georgia Tech, it's a little scary. But this team with R.J. Davis and Armando Bacot, it's the real deal this year. They added shooting in Cormac Ryan from Notre Dame. They're an elite team. They are the best team in the ACC. They are probably the third best team in the nation as it stands right now. Could be number 2. I might give them a slight edge over Purdue if I'm being completely honest. Okay. But yeah, I think that Purdue and North Carolina to the Final Four, and from there, I don't really know. It's one of the Big 12 teams because there's like 5 of them that could end up there. Yeah. I'd keep an eye on for the Sweet 16 at least. I'd keep an eye on Iowa State. Okay, we'll see what happens, but in that Mountain West Conference.
I was just going to ask you that one.
That Mountain West Conference, the thorn in my side for my rankings, just because I have mixed feelings about Utah State. I think San Diego State's a very good team. I think Utah State's a very good team as well. There's like 5 teams in the Mountain West that could, that could make a case, but yeah, it's tough. They're definitely like a 4 or 5 bid team this year. Or conference, excuse me.
Yeah, they're very formidable. It's like what the Sun Belt hopes to become, right? Like a mid-major that's got like a dominance section of the conference there. And Captain America has come back and asked a very important question. Obviously, as a Coastal grad, I'm sure that's Coastal somewhere on the list. But obviously, did you grow up with loving somebody else, or have you just fully bought into Syracuse with your time up there? Kind of. Where do you sit on favorite teams as far as that goes?
Well, I grew up in a family that was 2 generations deep Notre Dame grads. So Notre Dame football was a weekly holiday for us. It has been some of the best moments of my life and some of the most gut-wrenching, heartbreaking moments that I've ever had to endure. But Notre Dame football, definitely my favorite. But shouts up all the way, especially here.
Yeah, especially on a Sun Belt podcast, right? Definitely got to go with that. Hey, so real quick, I want to touch on this. So you mentioned the fact Purdue lost as the 1 seed, and in a mirror image, didn't Virginia do the same thing and then win the national championship the very next year as well?
Yes, they did. Do I think it'll happen again? No. But no, I think they'll get to at least the Final Four.
I can respect that.
We'll have to see.
Yeah.
Yep. Shouts up, Captain.
Yep. Troy fan paying respect. Look, he's literally saluting you as he says respectable. It's got to be one of those things, like you just have a fan base that's similar. Maybe you hate each other on the field, but when we're doing stuff like this, it's just all about the Sun Belt getting better and coming together and being something everybody wants to watch and be a part of. And I know baseball is going to bring that as well, as we, as you well know, with Coast. Did they win? The national championship was just before your time there?
Just before my time there. Actually, the national championship put Coastal on my radar. And then I took my college visit and I was like, wow, this place is special. And that's how I ended up there. So I thank Gary Gilmore every single day. And this is his last ride. They're in the preseason top 25, so should be a great year for Coastal baseball.
Yeah, from what I hear and what I gather, the missing piece or link was a little bit related to maybe pitching last year, and they feel like they've really gotten that this year. They had some young guys who they expected more out of this year, I guess, too.
Yeah. My hot take is they had the best lineup in the nation, but they made some questionable decisions in the regional with their pitching staff, and it led to them getting knocked out in their own regional. So I think this year they've got Austin Bodine coming back. They've got Derek Bender coming back. It's still going to be a dangerous lineup. Now we got to see if the pitching staff follows suit.
Yeah, absolutely. You got any other quick takes on another team or two that could be up at the top of the conference for baseball?
Well, Texas State, they are always in the running. They are always in the running. I mean, it's Texas is one of baseball's one of the golden areas. So definitely keep an eye on the Bobcats. And Georgia State as well. Georgia State is a thorn in Coastal side for baseball. I'd honestly, I couldn't tell you who is still on their roster from when I was there or who they've reloaded with, but Georgia State usually fields a very good team.
Yeah, Georgia Southern's got a sneaky good team too. I feel like last year they had some struggles that maybe they didn't see coming, but they had some games where they put a lot of runs on the board as well. And I feel like not enough respect is being paid to Southern Miss too. Not by you specifically, TJ. I'm talking about in the nation. I mean, where they got to last year, and I feel like in what we've seen on some of the football aspects, I feel like, yeah, maybe the roster isn't what a lot of people are looking at correctly. You got to think about like the winning culture, the fan base. They sell out season tickets for baseball. I think that's just a phenomenal thing for anybody to do, knowing with what I've seen with baseball in college, right? I think Southern Miss is going to come out of nowhere a little bit. The Cajuns may return. We know that they've got a pretty good program down there. And now that we're saying all this, I'm definitely getting you back on. I have two, I think, at least one pretty permanent co-host for baseball coming up. But TJ, we're definitely going to have you on there to actually know what you're talking about and get your thoughts on baseball at some point as we go through the season here. But
yeah, I'll be keeping tabs. You just let me know.
Oh, yeah, absolutely, man. This was by far and away our best basketball show. It won't surprise me if the numbers show it when it's all said and done. Thank you for bringing your expertise and your time, really, to the show and doing this, because I know there's other things you have to be doing, I think. So,
like I said, I can push that back. It's no problem. I sent him a text right in the middle. This was a lot of fun. I'll 100% push that back for this.
Okay, well, awesome. We really appreciate it. That'll wrap it up. I think this is by far the longest show we've had, and in the best way possible. So again, TJ, I really appreciate you coming on and providing some expertise, quite frankly, on what you've seen from the MAC and Sunbelt so far. Hopefully this weekend can live up to expectations on our Sunbelt side of things for us. And before we go, just tell people one more time where they can like and follow you with your write-ups on basketball and just in general, if they want to follow you on social media.
Yeah, definitely check out cbbreview.com. It's a wonderful group of guys there that, we're covering all basketball all the time. So definitely check them out. Once again, cbbreview.com. And then on Twitter, I am at @SullyVoice_. So check me out there. I've got some links in my bio to the rest of my stuff, but yeah, definitely check out CBB Review. We post daily, and we're going to be getting really busy with these next couple of weeks. There's a chance that I end up in Arizona, so we'll see what happens. But definitely follow me for Boston. I'll be in Boston for the Sweet 16.
Oh, very nice. We will definitely be following along. Once again, we thank you very much for your time, TJ, and we will see all of you guys next time.